One filmmaker has always been ahead of his time.
Time, stop! Go.
Now, from visionary writer and director Francis Ford Coppola, comes an event nothing can prepare you for.
Hello there. Have you fallen into an open manhole recently? Do you find yourself in the company of strangers? Well, then you might very well be in the feature underground. My name is Hunter Lanier. Once again, I am here bringing you a brand new review of an upcoming release. This time, it is the highly anticipated, much discussed, somewhat controversial film from living legend Francis Ford Coppola. So, where to begin? I'm going to start with this, because I think this is the most important thing that will affect your interest in the movie. What I want to start with is the tone of the movie, because the tone of the movie is not what I was expecting at all. Now, I remember reading leading up to the premiere of the movie and the press surrounding the movie afterward. A lot of the discussion was around, how do you sell this movie? And based on the trailers that I saw before watching the movie, I think they did a pretty poor job of selling it. In other words, they sold a different movie than what the movie actually is. This is not a drama. This is not a drama like The Godfather, or The Conversation, or Apocalypse Now, or Dracula, or Tetro. On the poster, beneath the title of the movie, almost like an asterisk, it says something else. It says, A Fable. This is extremely important, because this is what the movie is. That's the tone. The movie has a storybook quality, almost like a bedtime story. I think if I had to describe the tone, right now I would describe it as light satire with big ideas. There's a lot of comedy in the movie, way more than I was expecting. Jon Voight, for instance, is really funny. Another thing that's important to know going in is that this movie is not abstract. It's not like you're watching Inland Empire or Koyaanisqatsi, where it's just a series of images, kind of a visual poem, trying to relate emotions or ideas through just images. But the movie isn't grounded like The Godfather or The Conversation either. There is a narrative through line, and there are characters with arcs, but it's all wrapped up in the package of a modern fable. For example, the main character, Cesar, played by Adam.driver, has a fantastical power. There is an uphill love story, straight out of a fairy tale. There are conniving villains. The world they inhabit is a fantastical one. It's a splicing of ancient Rome and modern America. Statues come alive at night. The characters are not complex human beings. The characters in this movie are archetypes. Each one represents an idea or a specific role in society. Cesar is the hero of the story because Coppola believes that the innovator is the hero of a society. The imperfect artist that gives the people automobiles when all they want are faster horses. The one who pushes society always toward greener pastures. The one who never shrugs and says it could be worse, but who's always saying it could be better. If God is the original creator and the ultimate good, then the creator must be closest to God, and therefore the most holy. Giancarlo Esposito's character, on the other hand, is something of a foil, in that he represents order and structure and conservatism, holding on to what works, accepting imperfections, and learning to live with them and work around them. Shia LeBeouf plays this Caligula or Nero character, or just entropy itself, in that He is sort of this, represents this parasite that can infect a society to varying degrees depending on that society's built-in immune system. In America's case, that immune system would be the Constitution. John Voight and Aubrey Plaza are sort of lust and greed, representing these basic human desires, these base human sins, these lizard brain impulses that tend to undercut grand progress in favor of temporary pleasures. So essentially you have Adam Driver's character as this prime creative working against these various foils. Now once you accept what this movie is, which is essentially an adult pop-up book of archetypes and big generational ideas, I think the movie has the best chance of working. More so than any movie I've seen this year or in a long time. I really do feel like I want to watch it again. Because I really was caught off guard by the movie's tone. It took me quite a while into the movie to grasp what the movie is trying to be. Even the dialogue is not written to be natural and sound like things that people would actually say. It's written in a more poetic cadence. And the same thing for the editing, which puts you off a little at first because it's so frantic and intentionally mystifying. But even with all of this, all of these big ideas and stylistic trickery, I do think this movie is actually probably Francis Ford Coppola's most personal movie. And that's because, not because it's about his childhood or it's like his version of the Fabelmans, but because you can tell that this entire movie is just Coppola's inner dialogue. Each character represents his own impulses, his own intellect, and his own battle of ideas happening in his head, and which happens in all of our heads. And all of the questions and ideas in this movie, I think, are probably a little more common to someone who's at the end of their life. And all of a sudden, they're thinking a little bit more about the nature of time. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the main character in this movie, the hero, the character who is basically Coppola himself as this prime creative, I don't think it's a coincidence that his power is stopping time. I don't think it's a coincidence that this movie is largely focused on the beginnings and ends of things, whether that's human life or civilizations. And what's really interesting is that through all of this dialogue, all of these huge philosophical ideas, Coppola comes out the other side an optimist. In fact, the ending of this movie is very much reminiscent of the ending of George Stevens's Giant, in that the movie is perpetuating the idea that each generation stands on the shoulders of the last and selects for the better angels of our nature. Now, just that the movie has made me think of all of these ideas is, I think, a testament to how much I enjoyed this movie. It's a movie that obeys no laws, clearly made by an aging creative that has gotten bored with structure. I mean, Coppola is already talking about his next movie, which is going to redefine cinema and be a live experience. So he's clearly uninterested in the things that interested him about the art form when he was a young man. He's done making 3-act structure stories. He's now off in this other realm of expanding what a movie even is, which is in total contradiction to one of his contemporaries, Martin Scorsese, who is still finding more and more in traditional stories. And I don't think either approach is the wrong approach. I think someone like Scorsese will always find, I think there's always going to be more to traditional stories. There's always going to be room there. But I love that someone like Coppola is just in this other plane of thought, doing something completely outside of the realm of tradition. Everything about Megalopolis is completely contradictory to anything you would read in like a how to write a screenplay in 21 days book you'd find at Barnes and Noble. Any stupid Google how to write a screenplay, any dumb blog or article that tells you about structure. But what Megalopolis drives home is that all of that screenplay, this is how you write a screenplay stuff, all the tradition and structure, it's all well and good, but you should really be concerned about telling the story that only you can tell. Don't try to make your version of something. Do the thing that no one else will do if you had never existed. And Megalopolis is a movie that I don't think anyone could ever even get close to making other than Francis Ford Coppola. Megalopolis is a movie unlike anything else. Completely dismissive of convention and really interested in philosophy and building upon the greatest ideas people have ever had and elevating societal debate to a higher level of thinking. And for all of that and more, I think this is the most fun I've had at a movie all year. I would go so far as to say that this is my favorite movie of 2024 so far. Not that there's been a whole lot of competition. Now, that's not to say that this is a perfect movie by any means. For as much as I appreciated Coppola bringing all of these ideas into a movie, I do think the movie probably has too many ideas. I think he tried to pack too much into what Megalopolis could have been. I think some of the ideas, maybe if he had focused on fewer ideas and gave them a little bit of breathing room, you would have had something more satisfying. Not that every movie has to be satisfying. But for example, The Conversation. It's a movie about a very particular character with a few very particular ideas. And it dives into those ideas until it gets to the very bottom of them and the character. Megalopolis, on the other hand, is very much just a hand skimming the water. Another issue I had with the movie is that while there are many scenes and images and visual effects that are extremely memorable, for example, there are these statues, and there's one scene in which Adam Driver is driving through the city at night, and these statues are coming to life in the driving rain of the nighttime. There's a doomsday scene in which the silhouettes of cowering citizens are plastered on the skyscrapers of this city by the fire that is raining from the sky. But then, on the other hand, there are these scenes where people are just talking and the movie just looks ugly. I don't know what it is exactly. It reminded me of Coppola's last movie, which came out 13 years ago, Twixt, which I thought was very bad. And part of that was that it had this digital look to it. Now, obviously, there are directors. We've had digital photography. We've filmed movies digitally for long enough now that people have figured out how to make it look good. But there are scenes in Megalopolis that I don't think look good. They look very pedestrian. And I almost think it has to be intentional, because how could you not look at it and think that this looks good? So I don't even know if it is intentional. I don't know why. I don't know the point. I just think it looks ugly. Lastly, even though I really do love the idea of this movie, that it is an ode to genius and the better angels of our nature, that we're not just complicated apes, but that we're something much, much bigger and capable of things that we cannot even comprehend at the moment. The movie isn't exactly subtle in its messaging of this. Adam Driver's character for much of the movie is just Coppola talking through Adam Driver. Again, this is much more forgiving once you accept that the movie is just a fairy tale and that it's not really supposed to be subtle. Fairy tales are not subtle. Fables are not subtle. They're stories of heroes and villains and proclamations of justice. And that's what this movie is. It's a bedtime story from Grandpa Coppola, but it is preachy. And I would point that out if it was preaching things that I didn't agree with. I would have no trouble doing so. So I feel like I should bring up when it's being preachy, even if it is something that I agree with. One other thing I wanted to bring up is that in doing press for this movie, Coppola, in response to the reception of Megalopolis at the initial screenings, which was largely mixed. Some people loved it, some people hated it, some people just didn't know what to make of it. Coppola has been talking a lot about the tendency for some movies, and some of his own movies, to be hated upon release, but later found this sort of paradisial afterlife of acclaim. Now, I don't think Megalopolis is on the same level as The Godfather, The Conversation, The Godfather Part 2, Apocalypse Now, but that is admittedly a high bar. I think The Godfather is the greatest movie ever made. But I also don't think currently that it will ever be considered to be as good as those movies. I don't think it will ever have that place in the zeitgeist. And I say that because I don't think the movie is really holding that much back. I don't know that there is that much to discover in the movie that isn't made very apparent by the movie itself. The only shift in public perception I could see happening is what I talked about earlier in the review, which is people accepting the movie for what it is, being a fairy tale, being a fable, and not going in looking for a dense character drama like a young Coppola would have made. If anything, I would say Megalopolis is closest to the surrealism of Apocalypse Now, as well as the theatrical spectacle of One from the Heart. In fact, Megalopolis, it often made me think of a musical without the music, because it has that heightened reality of a musical. Of course, I could be wrong. I could be totally off base, and Megalopolis becomes a bona fide classic in the future. But I think it's important to remember that I don't think very many modern movie lovers are putting Cheyenne Autumn against The Searchers. I don't think very many people are putting City of Women up against La Dolce Vita. I don't think very many people are putting Dreams up against High and Low. So just because an artist becomes older and wiser, and we love that they're still around making movies, doesn't necessarily mean that that wisdom will translate to great art. But of course, I think we should certainly respect these aging masters and always listen when they decide that they have something to say, and always give them the creative benefit of the doubt. If only because I'm not so certain that these old masters are being replaced by new masters one-to-one. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Megalopolis. I'm sure I'll have more when I'm done filming. I'll have more when I see it a second time. I'll have different thoughts probably. But as it stands, on September 24th, 2024, these are my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts on my thoughts. Let me know, are you excited for Megalopolis? Have you already seen it? Once you see it, I want you to come back to this review. I want you to leave a comment with your own thoughts. If you want to drop anything spoilery or have a spoilery discussion in the comments, just label your comment as so people don't read anything they don't want to read. If you thought my thoughts were interesting, maybe give this video a little bit of a like. maybe give it a little bit of a subscribe. I will have more reviews coming up in the future. We are starting to get into Oscar season, which means the movie studios have been holding back all the good stuff and they're about to just drop it on us. So hopefully a lot of really interesting reviews will be coming your way soon. But until then, I just want to leave you with what I always leave you, which is just a friendly neighborhood reminder that every day underground is a good day.